You're performing great, you're not doing so well. Just how is performance generated? That's our topic today on With Winning in Mind. Hello, I'm Troy. This is along with my partner in crime, Lanny Bassham, as I call him Dad. And we're going to talk about performance and just how it's generated. And for most of y'all probably don't know that when you studied the mental game, you went through a 2-year period of interviewing, top performers, Olympic gold medalists, world champions. Why are you doing most of the winning? You came up with this really cool stat or phrase, if you want to call it, which is 95% of winning is being done by 5% of participants. And you started wanting to know, why is it that most of the winning is being done by the same people over and over? And then you realize that it's not just in your sport, growing up in international rifle shooting, which is an Olympic sport, but this was also in other Olympic sports that we find that most of the people doing most of the winning. And then all of a sudden, you started putting some pieces together, as I understand it, and you created this model on how performance is generated. So we talked about it on the show many times. I know we've talked about it. Heather and I have talked about it. I think even you and Heather have done an episode on that. But we've never really gone to the beginning of just how did you come up with the performance model and really started to understand how performance is generated and how that can help people get better in what they do today. So that's our topic for the day, and take it away.
Okay. Well, when I first started learning how to do international rifle, like most people learn how to do what they do, play golf or whatever it is, their sport or application, they kind of do it the same way that I did it. You take a lesson and practice. I mean, that's the key to what you're doing. You think that if I practice more, if I learn more, the more I learn, the better it's going to get, and that actually works in the beginning. You train hard, you take lessons, or you learn from coaches, and I did that, and it got me to collegiate All-American. It got me on the U.S. team, and I'm thinking, oh, that's all you got to do. And but my first 3 years on the U.S. team, I was practicing. I was working hard. I was training all the time, and I was getting better all the time. But my teammates were getting better. But the only difference between me and my teammates is I wasn't winning, and they were, and that bothered me. And so I realized that there was something that these elite people were doing. Maybe one of the reasons I wasn't winning is because maybe it's possible that my 3 teammates, we had 4-person teams back in those days. My 3 teammates probably were number 1, 2, and 3 in the world at the time. One reason I wasn't winning is because I got gun gods on my team, but there was definitely a reason why things were. They were doing something I wasn't doing, and I couldn't figure it out. So I had I think the performance model has 3 parts to it. It has a conscious, subconscious, and self-image part. That's what I eventually came up with. Well, I had the subconscious part, the skill side. I had that figured out, but it wasn't getting me to winning. So I knew something was different. So the way I discovered that what you think about matters is I started doing some analysis but why I wasn't winning, and I was just getting too many bad shots. I was getting as many good shots as they were, but I was getting too many bad shots. So I decided I will get rid of the bad shots. And so every time I shot a bad shot, I wrote down what I was doing wrong. So what do you think happened to my bad shots?
Got more bad shots.
I got more bad shots. That's right. And so but I learned a valuable lesson doing that. I learned that what you think about matters. And so the conscious mind came into view. And so I realized that, okay, so now the performance model is what you think about and your skill level. So there are helpful and harmful thoughts. And so I decided that I'm going to find the helpful ones and avoid the harmful ones. So I had two elements of the performance model. And I thought, okay, I got it. I got it figured out now. And
So we got the skill, how to do it, and we got controlling my thoughts,
yeah,
which is extremely helpful to let yourself do what you want to do. And at this point, when you figured that out, just how good were you in your career? This is what,
well,
early 70s?
this was prior to the Olympics in 1972. So I had spent 3 years on the U.S. team, made the Olympic team in 1972, did not perform as those two elements didn't help me win the gold medal in 1972 because I won the silver medal because I could not control the conscious side as well as I needed to, but it wasn't. It was after that. It was when after the Olympics, and once I started talking to Olympic champions in other sports, and they were bringing up things that were a little bit different. There was definitely a missing element to my model. I knew that we had to have good thoughts and we knew we had to have skills, but there was something different. But I didn't know what to call it. I didn't know how to refer to it, but it had something to do with your habits and your attitudes. How you felt about what you were doing mattered, not just what you thought about, but how you felt about it. I mean, did you consider yourself to be good at this or not good at this? And that was matter. And it wasn't until I read a book and I thought, that's the missing link. And the book I read was Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz.
There's a tongue twister.
Yeah. But he laid it out. He named it, and he called it self-image. And I thought, that's it. Self-image is your habits and attitudes. And what I realized was that maybe the best way to describe self-image for me was that, let's say that you and I have equal skill. We're competing against each other for a championship. Maybe it's a playoff or a finals or something like that. And we have equal skill and we have an equal conscious mind. In other words, we're thinking the same good thoughts. Everything's identically equal except for one thing. You think you can beat me, and I think you can beat me. It's over for me. That's self-image. And so once I had that piece, then I realized that the performance model was complete. And so I started thinking about, well, how do you build a self-image? And so that's how the performance model came into being.
So how do you build belief that you truly can do what you're capable of doing in training in a competition when it really, really matters? Like when the lights are shining at the Olympic Games, for many people, that's the biggest event they'll ever compete in their sport, is the Olympic Games. And being able to perform at that level equal to what you can do at home when there is no pressure is really where the self-image is going to shine and show. What's interesting, I think, with the model, and if you haven't seen the model, he presents it in his book, With Winning in Mind, which you have the conscious, subconscious, which are pretty much, right side by side with each other. But then to the right of the subconscious and a little lower, you have this self-image. And you show the relationship of conscious, subconscious, then self-image generating performance. How did you come up with the order of conscious and subconscious in self-image and the way you present it in the model. How did you come up with that? Because I think that is the brilliance of the book With Winning in Mind, the foundation of what you call mental management, to me, is that model. Without that model, you don't have the triad state. Without that model, you don't help people really understand that, look, you can be a great skill. You can think the right way, but if you truly internally don't believe you're as good as you really are, you're never going to win.
Well, there are actually three concepts that fit together in this model. Three major tenets of mental management. We teach that everything we do in life has three phases to it: anticipation phase, action phase, reinforcement phase. Well, that fits the model. The anticipation phase is basically a conscious circle skill. The action phase is basically a subconscious circle skill. And the reinforcement phase, what you think about after it, builds or tears down your self-image based on how you respond to what just happened to you. So those three mental processes, conscious, subconscious, self-image, are necessary for you to be able to perform in the three phases of a task. So how a person actually performs is filtered by the self-image. So that's the reason why in the performance model, the self-image is actually between your skill level and your performance. Let's look at it this way. Your skills are your potential. So a person has a certain potential based on how much they know and how much they've trained. And the performance is their production. Well, what determines how much of their potential becomes production in a tournament? It's your self-image. Your self-image has something to do with determining how much of your skill you can actually turn into production, which is your score.
Yeah, there's probably a relationship between the conscious, what you think about, and the self-image is your belief you can do that when you need to do it under pressure to take advantage of that skill level, which is the subconscious. How does that relationship work in competition? And do you think it's something that people can train to work on, or does it just take time? I mean, how do they build? I get the subconscious, and I think most people get the subconscious pretty easy. If you want to get really good at something, you just need two ingredients. You used to say all the time, you just get good instruction by a quality instructor, which in today's world in the United States, and pretty much pick a sport, and you can find good coaching.
Sure.
And take that good coaching and then apply repetition, which is hours and hours and hours. And we've talked about the three books that came out years ago that really proves this, which is Talent Code, Talent's Overrated, and Outliers, in looking at this is the amount of time you need to spend if you want to get really, really good. But if you want to get great, you got to almost double that amount of time. But that doesn't apply to conscious self-image. So how does one work on that self-image part?
Well, it starts with, we tend to talk about these three mental processes as circles. So the bigger the circle, the better you do. And there's a relationship between the conscious mind and the self-image. In other words, how does the self-image get bigger? It gets bigger through imprinting. And, well, what's that? Well, that's what you think about, what you talk about, what you write about, the people that you're around, what actually happens. And so all of those things are controlled primarily. Maybe not what you actually do is probably a self-image issue, a subconscious circle issue. But what you think about, talk about, write about, that's certainly a conscious circle issue. So all of those imprints are created. The imprints that determine how big the self-image is are all created by the conscious mind. So the conscious mind creates the imprints, and it could be positive or negative. And when they're positive, the self-image tends to grow. When they're negative, the self-image tends to shrink. And the self-image is the repository of those imprints. So it's kind of like a memo. So you think about a positive thought, and the memo goes down into the self-image memo jar. And if there are more positive imprints than negative imprints, self-image tends to grow. If not, self-image tends to shrink. So the conscious mind and the self-image are directly related. And once the self-image gets to a certain size, it determines the way that the self-image and the subconscious are related. Is that once the self-image gets to a certain size, it determines how much of the skill level in the subconscious that ends up being available to the athlete in terms of score. So they're all related to one another, and once you understand that, you realize that, boy, that self-image is really important.
So basically, people are constantly thinking about if they want to subscribe to the channel, but we want to get to the self-image to where it's like them to like it all the time.
That's right.
Is that what you're saying? So if you do like this, click a thumbs up, share it with someone. And looking at this self-image, it becomes a habit to do something. I'm probably a YouTube junkie like most people today. They use a lot of their time consuming concept on the platform of YouTube. And I'm watching something, I really like something, I would just move on. I don't like something, I would just move on. My self-image for years would just be, okay, that was good, go to the next one. Oh, I don't like it, just go. Basically, just go to the next one, go to the next one, go to the next one. But then you start finding things that you like to watch, and then all of a sudden, okay, well, I'm going to subscribe to that channel, I'm going to subscribe to that channel. And then within that, you start realizing, I really like this. I'm going to click, 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 and you start developing a pattern with that. That same type of pattern and just watching content definitely relates to that type of pattern of developing an athlete. So I remember when I was young and you had the international shooting school, your big thing is one of the ways that we're going to build an individual is to first protect them, and them really was meaning their self-image. It's not protecting them personally, it's protecting their belief structure. So you had certain guidelines that people were not allowed to talk about certain things, that weren't allowed to talk in a way to other people that affect those individuals. You create an environment to where people could grow and build their self-image. And one of the things was you always talked about what you should do if you're performing, and it's not to your high level. You talked about, okay, what should we do? But if someone is performing well, you made it a point in front of other people to share why they're doing it well. So when you're looking at that, is that the key ingredient to building self-image, is to get the individual to constantly talk about what they need to focus on regardless of their performance? Or are we talking about the only time we can build self-image is when they're performing great and reinforcing it?
Well, when you're performing great, whatever you reinforce, that's what grows. Okay, so if you're reinforcing, if you're thinking, talking, writing about what you're doing right, you're going to do it right more often. Your self-image wants to grow in that direction. On the other hand, if you're beating yourself up, it wants to grow. It wants to shrink, and you're causing your self-image. If you're complaining about something, if you're beating yourself up about a poor performance, if you're constantly talking about those things, your self-image is going to respond to whatever you're reinforcing. And so that's what you need to be concerned about. And as far as so somebody asked me one time after I was talking about this concept, he says, well, what do you do about your mistakes? You just forget about them? And I said, no. You think about what you need to do. If you make a mistake, learn from it. what do you need to do to fix it? Think about the solution, because this is a primary principle of self-image growth, is that when you're thinking about the solution, self-image grows. When you think about the problem, self-image shrinks. Sometimes you have to think about the problem to understand that you got one, but try to keep that to the problem to a minimum, and reinforce what's the solution to the problem. What do you need to do? That causes self-image to grow.
So we spend way too much time in life probably focusing on the problem rather than thinking about solution and feeding the proper imprints.
Well, every time you complain about something, you're focusing on the problem. You're not focusing on the solution. Now, there's a lot of reinforcement in the world today about the negative.
And everyone's good at complaining.
Yeah, everybody's got something to complain about. You just ask any rifle shooter when they come off the line, how'd it go? What are they going to talk about? They're going to talk about the bad shots. They're not going to talk about the good ones. And that's a big mistake. But it's prevalent throughout most sports. I've asked that question to thousands of people over the last 45 years. Is in your sport, when somebody asks you, how did you do they talk about what went right, or do they talk about what went wrong? And they almost all of them say, well, they talk about what went wrong. And that's a big problem. You see that being done when you're a young performer, and you start copying what everybody's doing. And it's a lot easier for you to talk about the few mistakes that you made. Maybe you had you played 18 holes, and 15 of those 18 you did just fine. You don't talk about those. You talk about the 3 holes that you bogeyed, or that you had a problem with. So that's the habit that people get into, because more people that they're around are talking about their mistakes than talking about what they did right. Well, you don't want to boast, about to brag about yourself too much, but internally, it's probably a better idea to reinforce what you want to repeat, and that means that you don't want to repeat reinforcing the poor attempts, and by complaining about them or talking about them or listening to people complain about their problems.
It is easier, though, to complain rather than focus on a solution. I know when I was at the program, it was on a team, and part of our responsibility was we had a junior program on the team. I'm sure when you were at the Army Academy, you had a junior program as well. And it's a way to give back to the community. It's a way to help young people get into the sport and teach them in a safe, fun environment how to really get good at a particular sport. And I remember the first 5 years, I was only there for 8 years, but the first 5 years, I just hated doing it, because you go there and half the kids didn't want to do it seriously. It was just for them just to plink and have fun. And my whole focus was on, I should be home by now. It is 6 to 8 o'clock at night. I should be home. I'm working with kids that really don't care about competing. They don't care about getting better. And yet I'm in an environment where that's all it is during the day, is us getting better, or you get shipped out. But here we got a junior program that's almost the opposite. And no one really liked coaching in general, because there was very few kids in that program that really wanted to do well. So when I took over that program, one of the things I was thinking about is there a way that I can fix this mindset, this attitude, where we just get there and we just watch these individuals. We make a couple of changes, but no one really gets any better. They just kind of come and go. And I thought there's got to be a couple of these kids that really want to grow, but they can't, because the environment is, you got a bunch of people that don't care. And so what I did is I just changed the environment. I created an environment where the people that wanted to have fun could go have fun, and separate them from the people who really wanted to compete so they can learn and compete. They're around other people that learn to compete. So when this person made an error, they're next to, this person. They're hearing the correction that I'm giving them. They're hearing the correction that another coach is giving them. The rule is we only focus on the solution, and we brag about our success, and we share it with one another. And I made it to where the parents weren't allowed to be there. We had a firing line, and then way back in the back, at like 20 yards, here you go, Mom and Dad, which is basically the entrance to the range. That's where you can hang out. And here's some spotting scopes. You can watch your kids shoot, but you're not allowed to talk to them. We kind of controlled that environment. And what I learned is if you don't control the imprinting, what is being fed to the individual, they're not going to start changing the way they really think about how they're doing what they're doing. They'll know that they're getting better, but that doesn't mean they're going to really believe they're getting better. And so creating that environment and then going one step further, getting the individuals to focus on taking responsibility, building themselves up was a key ingredient. And that was the whole thing about the performance analysis. And you'd always have your shooters record in a performance journal. You always call it performance analysis, and to best my regulation is like you want to analyze your performance, not your lack of performance. And so you always like the word performance analysis because how did you perform today? In other words, what did you do well? What did you learn? Let's focus on that. When did I think many people watching us, they get, okay, I understand the skill. You practice. Over time, you start getting better. I get that imprint. I hit a good shot. I see a good result. I feel good. I'm a swimmer. I do a good time. I look at the time. I feel good about it. Coach says, man, that was great performance. I feel good. Teammates come congratulate me. So from a skill and a conscious level, I can see that. But just how does its imprinting and how far does the imprinting go? It's not just the individual, it's external as well. So if there's some key things that you could leave a person like, okay, these are the three main things I think you need to do to control imprinting in the self-image, what would they be?
Well, the first thing would be to understand that the self-image is controlled, is affected by imprinting. That understand what imprinting does. It either grows or shrinks the self-image. And when you think about what you did right, the self-image grows. When you think about solutions, the self-image grows. When you think about problems, self-image shrinks. When you think about bad performances, self-image shrinks. So understanding how the system works. Everybody kind of knows that positive thinking works. I mean, I don't have any good bestseller books on the power of negative thinking. So but here's why it works is because of imprinting. So understanding imprinting is.
So one is controlling your thoughts.
Number two is be sure that you reinforce your good performances. And number three, stay away from reinforcing your poor performances by complaining about them or talking about them or any time that you can avoid talking about your problems. And this is one thing that I see in the top 5%ers that do 95% of the winning. They are extremely optimistic people, and they rarely talk about their mistakes.
Yeah, which is hard for most people to do.
Yeah.
So if you like to improve and get better and you like this content, please consider subscribing, hit the like button. Let us know what you'd like for us to talk about in the future in the comment section, and we'll see you next time.